The night was heavy with rain, each drop striking the deserted asphalt like the ticking of a clock. In the quiet corners of the city, truth rarely survived. Masks, lies, and shadows made the air thicker than the smoke curling from the dim alleys. Yet beneath it all, there was one man who carried the weight of confessions no priest could handle, a killer who had grown tired of silence. He had been many things in the whispers of the people, a phantom, a monster, a ghost in human skin. But no one called him by his name anymore. He had buried that with his first victim. Tonight, though, the urge to speak was louder than the rain, and louder still than the pounding of guilt that lived in his chest. The world believed killers killed for pleasure, for rage, for twisted hunger. Some did. He wasn't blind to that. But for him, the blade was never about blood. It was about balance, about a truth he had long decided no lawman could protect. He sat in the flickering light of an old diner, the booths empty, the waitress half asleep behind the counter. In front of him, a young reporter sat stiff with her notebook, staring at him as though he were both prey and predator. She had begged for the interview, thinking it was a chance to expose the city's most feared man. He had agreed, not because he wanted fame, but because he wanted the story told right, before someone else rewrote it with ink dipped in lies. "You think I kill because I like it," he said quietly, his voice carrying no tremor. "You're wrong." The reporter's pen hesitated above the paper. "Then why? Why the trail of bodies? Why the fear?" He smiled faintly, not in amusement but in weariness. "Because sometimes the truth is buried with the innocent, and someone has to dig it out." His mind drifted back to the first night, the smell of burning whiskey in the tavern, the sound of fists against flesh. His sister's cry had cut through the drunken chaos, and he had found her bloodied, broken by the hands of men who would never see a courtroom. When he struck, it wasn't calculated. It was fire, raw and merciless. And when the silence finally returned, he had looked into their lifeless eyes and realized justice wasn't blind. It was simply too afraid to see. "After that," he whispered, "the city gave me reason after reason. Crooked judges, dealers feeding poison to children, men who wore badges but carried knives for the highest bidder. Tell me, Miss Carter, if no one else will stop them, should I have stayed silent? Should I have let the world rot just because the law said so?" The reporter's throat tightened, her voice fragile. "That doesn't make you right. It makes you dangerous." He leaned forward, his eyes catching the neon light that bled through the diner's window. They weren't the eyes of a madman. They were sharp, steady, and unbearably tired. Dangerous to who? To men who profit off misery? To those who smile in daylight and kill in the dark? If the truth itself is dangerous, then maybe it should be. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle, leaving the world muted and watchful. He knew she would read her article, and he knew the police would come for him eventually. But none of that mattered. The truth didn't need his survival, only his voice. He finished his coffee, pushed the cup aside, and rose. The reporter's pen clattered as she stood too, her fear battling her curiosity. "Where will you go?" she asked. He adjusted his coat, the shadow of his frame looming tall against the glass door. "Where the truth still hides. Where silence keeps screaming." He stepped out into the wet street, vanishing into the city that had made him. Behind him, the reporter sat trembling, realizing she had just been handed not a confession, but a burden. The killer's truth was no longer his alone. It lived in her hands, in her ink, and in every word she dared to print. And somewhere in the shadows, the city waited, knowing his story was not yet finished.